Patnubay ng mga magulang ang kailangan. For entertainment only, shoutout sa lahat ng mga Pinoy sa Propac, at lalong-lalo na sa mga panggabi at Hi Dubai. Kung gusto nyo ng mga bagong pelikula, mag-comment lang kayo below ng title, at sisikapin kong ibibigay isa-isa. Now let's go back to the video.
A Polish man marries an American girl, and though his English isn't very good, they get along very well. One day, he rushes into a lawyer's office and asks him to arrange a divorce for him. The lawyer says that getting a divorce would depend on the circumstances and asks him the following questions. Have you any grounds? Yes, an acre and a half and nice little home. No, I mean, what is the foundation of this case? It made of concrete. I don't think you understand. Does either of you have a real grudge? No, we have carport and not need one. I mean, what are your relations like? All my relations still in Poland. Is there any infidelity in your marriage? We have high-fidelity stereo and good DVD player. Does your wife beat you up? No, I always up before her. Why do you want this divorce? She going to kill me. What makes you think that? I got proof. What kind of proof? She going to poison me. She buy a bottle at drugstore and put on shelf in bathroom. I can read English pretty good, and it say, polish remover. A guy goes into a bar with his dog and asks for a drink. Instantly, the bartender says, "You can't bring that dog in here." The guy replies, "This is my seeing eye dog." "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," says the bartender, feeling bad. "Here, the first one is on me." The man takes his drink, then goes to a table near the door. Another guy walks into the bar with a dog. The first guy stops him and says, "You can't bring that dog in here unless you tell the bartender it's a seeing eye dog." The guy thanks him, continues to the bar, and asks for a drink. The bartender yells, "Hey, you can't bring that dog in here." The guy replies, "This is my seeing eye dog." The bartender says, "No, I don't think so. They don't use Chihuahuas as seeing eye dogs." The man pauses for a moment, then says, "What? They gave me a freaking Chihuahua?" A woman went to a restaurant in a small southern town. She ordered some chicken and began to eat. Eating too fast, she started to choke on a chicken bone. Bobby and Billy Ray, two country boys in the next booth, noticed she was choking. They knew that there was not enough time to call the paramedics, so they got up and went over to help her. Bobby dropped his coveralls and bent over. Then Billy Ray started licking his butt. The choking woman saw these two go at it and was so grossed out that she threw up all over the place, dislodging the chicken bone from her throat. Bobby pulled his overalls back up and said, "You're right, Billy Ray. That Heimlich maneuver works every time."
Jimmy goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, wherever I touch, it hurts." The doctor asks, "What do you mean?" Jimmy says, "When I touch my shoulder, it really hurts. When I touch my knee, it hurts. When I touch my forehead, it really, really hurts." Jimmy was diagnosed with a broken index finger later that day. My dad sent me this on Facebook, which means it's almost guaranteed to be a repost. I touched it up a bit, but here you go. The worst day ever. There I was, sitting at the bar, staring at my drink, when a large troublemaking biker steps up next to me, grabs my drink and gulps it down in one swig. "Well, what you gonna do about it?" he says menacingly. I burst into tears. "This is the worst day of my life," I say. "I'm a complete failure." I was late for a meeting and my boss fired me. When I went to the parking lot, I found that my car had been stolen and I don't have any insurance. I left my wallet in the cab I took to get home. At home, I found my wife with another man. Then my dog bit me. So I came to this bar to work up the courage to end it all. I bought a drink and dropped a suicide capsule in it. Then, after all that, as I sat down here watching the poison dissolve, You came in here and drank the whole damn thing. Three rough-looking bikers stomp into a truck stop where an old-timer is having breakfast. One of the bikers extinguishes his cigarette in the old guy's pancakes. The second biker spits a wad of chewing tobacco into his coffee. The third biker dumps the whole plate onto the floor. Without a word of protest, the old guy pays his bill and leaves. "Not much of a man, was he?" says one of the bikers. "Not much of a driver either," says the waitress. "He just backed his truck over 3 motorcycles." A dog wanted a loan for a new doghouse. He picked up a valuable knick-knack that he had sitting around and headed to the bank. Once there, he said that he wanted a loan and was using the knick-knack as collateral. The teller, named Patty Whack, looked at the knick-knack and said that it wasn't valuable enough for the amount he wanted loaned to him. The dog got angry and, in his best expression of a Karen, asked to see a manager. The manager came out. He looked at the knick-knack, then at Patty and told her, "It's a knick-knack, Patty Whack. Give the dog a loan." A couple was shopping at the mall on Christmas Eve and the mall was packed. As the wife walked through the mall, she was surprised to look up and see that her husband was nowhere around. She was quite upset because they had a lot to do. Because she was so worried, she called him on her mobile phone to ask him where he was. In a calm voice, the husband said, "Honey, you remember the jewelry store we went into about 5 years ago where you fell in love with that diamond necklace that we could not afford? And I told you that I would get it for you one day?" The wife choked up, started to cry and said, "Yes, I remember that jewelry store." He said, "Well, I'm in the bar right next to it." An Amish family goes to a mall for the first time. And of course, they are overwhelmed. The man stands in front of an elevator, puzzled what this contraption may be. He watches a very heavy-set woman enter it, the doors close and the elevator goes up, and as it returns, a young, beautiful woman emerges. "What is that, Pa?" little Joshua wants to know. "Never mind, son, but go get your mum here, quick." An 80-year-old man went to the doctor for a checkup, and the doctor was amazed at what good shape the guy was in. The doctor asked, "To what do you attribute your good health?" The old-timer said, "I'm a golfer, and that's why I'm in such good shape. I'm up well before daylight and out golfing up and down the fairways." The doctor said, "Well, I'm sure that helps, but there's got to be more to it." "How old was your father when he died?" The old-timer said. "Who said my father's dead?" The doctor said, "You mean you're 80 years old and your father is still alive? How old is he?" The old-timer said, "He's 100 years old, and in fact, he golfed with me this morning. That's why he's still alive. He's a golfer." The doctor said, "Well, that's great, but I'm sure there's more to it." "How about your grandfather? How old was he when he died?" The old-timer said, "Who said my grandpa's dead?" The doctor said, "You mean you're 80 years old and your grandfather's still living? How old is he?" The old-timer said, "He's 118 years old." The doctor was getting frustrated at this point and said, "I guess he went golfing with you this morning too." The old-timer said, "No, Grandpa couldn't go this morning because he got married." The doctor said in amazement, "Got married? Why would a 118-year-old guy want to get married?" The old-timer shot back, "Who said he wanted to?" Little John is walking at the mall with his grandma. He sees a coin of €1. He asks his grandma, "Can I pick that up?" His grandma answers, "No, no, everything that's on the ground is dirty." They walk further and he sees a note for €5. He asks his grandma, "Can I pick that up?" His grandma answers, "No, no, everything that's on the ground is dirty." They walk further and he sees a note of €100. Excitedly, he asks his grandma, "Can I pick that up?" His grandma answers, "No, no, no. Everything that's on the ground is dirty." They walk further and unfortunately, Grandma slips over a banana peel and falls. She asks Little John, "Can you pick me up?" And Little John answers, "No, no. Everything that's on the ground is dirty." A couple in their 90s are both having problems remembering things. They decide to go to the doctor for a checkup. The doctor tells them that they're physically okay, but they might want to start writing things down to help them remember. Later that night, while watching TV, The old man gets up from his chair. His wife asks, "Where are you going?" "To the kitchen," he replies. "Will you get me a bowl of ice cream?" "Sure." "Don't you think you should write it down so you can remember it?" she asks. "No, I can remember it." "Well, I'd like some strawberries on top too. You'd better write it down, because you know you'll forget it," he says. "I can remember that. You want a bowl of ice cream with strawberries. I'd also like whipped cream." "I'm certain you'll forget that, so you'd better write it down," she retorts. Irritated, he says, "I don't need to write it down. I can remember it. Leave me alone. Ice cream with strawberries and whipped cream. I got it, for goodness sake." Then he grumbles into the kitchen. After about 20 minutes, the old man returns from the kitchen and hands his wife a plate of bacon and eggs. She stares at the plate for a moment and says, "Where's my toast?" Harry and his wife are having hard financial times, so they decide that she'll become a hooker. She's not quite sure what to do, so Harry says, "Stand in front of that bar and pick up a guy. Tell him that you charge $100. If you have a question, I'll be parked around the corner." She's standing there for 5 minutes when a guy pulls up and asks, "How much?" She says, $100. He says, "All I got is 30. She says, "Hold on," and runs back to Harry and asks, "What can he get for 30? "A hand job," Harry replies. She runs back and tells the guy all he gets for $30 is a hand job. He agrees. She gets in the car. He unzips his pants, and out pops this huge... She stares at it for a minute and then says, "I'll be right back." She runs back to Harry and asks, "Can you loan this guy $70? A mother-in-law arrives home from the mall to find her son-in-law boiling angry and hurriedly packing his suitcase. "What happened?" she asks anxiously. "What happened?" "I'll tell you what happened. I sent an email to my wife telling her I was coming home today from my business trip. I get home and guess what I found? Yes, your daughter, my wife, is with a guy in our marital bed. This is unforgivable. The end of our marriage. I'm done. I'm leaving forever." "Calm down, my son," says his mother-in-law. "There is something very odd going on here. My daughter would never do such a thing. There must be a simple explanation. I'll go speak to her immediately and find out what happened." Moments later, the mother-in-law comes back with a big smile. "I told you there must be a simple explanation. She didn't get the email."
Billy Bob comes home from college to his redneck family in tears. "Ma, am I adopted?" he asks. "Heck no," replies his mother. "Why in tarnations would you think such a thing?" Billy Bob shows her his genealogy DNA test results. No match for any of his relatives, and strong matches for a family who lived on the other side of the county. Confused, his mother calls her husband. "Pa, Billy Bob has done a DNA test, and he might not be our son." "Well, he ain't," replies the husband. She gasps, "What do you mean?" The husband answers, "It was your idea in the first place. You remember that first night in the hospital when the baby did nothing but scream and cry? Then you asked me to change him? Well, I picked a good one, I reckon." Betty was a little old lady who was always cheerful and quite happy with her life. But lately, she had started having a bit of a problem. One day, she goes to the doctor and says, "I have this problem with gas, but it really doesn't bother me too much. My farts never smell and are always silent." The doctor replies, "Is that so?" Betty continues, "Yes. As a matter of fact, I've farted at least 20 times since I've been here in your office. You didn't know I was farting because they don't smell and are silent." The doctor says, "I see. Take these pills and come back to see me next week." Betty goes home and takes her pills as prescribed, and suddenly she starts seeing some big changes in her everyday life. The next week, Betty goes back to the doctor. "Doctor," she says, "I don't know what the hell you gave me, but now my farts, although still silent, stink terribly." The doctor nods and says, "Good. Now that we've cleared up your sinuses, let's work on your hearing." Two twin boys, age 6, had developed extreme personalities. One was a pessimist and the other a total optimist. Concerned, their parents took them to a psychiatrist. First, the psychiatrist treated the pessimist. Trying to brighten his outlook, the psychiatrist took him to a room filled with toys. But instead of yelping with delight, the little boy burst into tears. "What's the matter?" the psychiatrist asked. "Don't you want to play with any of the toys?" "Yes," the little boy bawled. "But if I did, I'd only break them." Next, the psychiatrist treated the optimist. Trying to dampen his outlook, the psychiatrist took him to a room piled to the ceiling with horse manure. But instead of wrinkling his nose in disgust, the optimist climbed to the top of the pile and began gleefully digging out scoop after scoop with his bare hands. "What are you doing?" the baffled psychiatrist asked. The little boy replied, "With all this manure, there must be a pony in here somewhere." A cowboy walks into a coffee shop with a shotgun in one hand and a bucket of horse manure in the other. He says to the waiter, "I'll have a coffee." The waiter says, "Sure, coming right up." He gets the cowboy a tall mug of coffee. The cowboy drinks it down in one gulp, picks up the bucket, throws the manure into the air, blasts it with the shotgun, and then walks out. 4 days later, the cowboy returns. He has his shotgun in one hand and another bucket of manure in the other. He walks up to the counter and says to the waiter, "I'll have a coffee." The waiter says, "Whoa, cowboy, we're still cleaning up from the last time you were in here. What the heck was that all about anyway?" The cowboy says, "I'm training for an executive management job. Drink coffee, shoot the shit, and disappear for a few days." As a butcher is shooing a dog from his shop, he sees a $20 bill and a note in his mouth reading, "5 lamb chops, please." Amazed, he takes the money, puts a bag of chops in the dog's mouth, and quickly closes the shop. He follows the dog and watches him wait for a green light, look both ways, and trot across the road to a bus stop. The dog checks the timetable and sits on the bench. When a bus arrives, he walks around to the front and looks at the number, then boards the bus. The butcher follows, dumbstruck. As the bus travels out into the suburbs, the dog takes in the scenery. After a while, he stands on his back paws to push the stop bell. Then the butcher follows him off. The dog runs up to a house and drops his bag on the step. He stands on his back paws and presses the doorbell. He does this again and again, but there is no answer. So he jumps on a wall, walks around the garden, beats his paw against a window, jumps off, and waits at the front door. A guy opens it and starts cursing and shouting at the dog. The butcher runs up and screams, "What are you doing? This dog is a genius." The guy at the door replies, "Genius, my butt. It's the second time this week he's forgotten his keys."